Welcome to this Sunday edition of Kruk and Kuip Extra Innings. As spring training camps have started, and they will play actual games this Friday. The hot stove is getting hot, hot, hot. And, and it's getting really hot right now as we have signings, trades to announce. We're going to start our series of MLB divisional previews. We're going to talk a little San Jose Sharks tonight. Talk about Brian Sabian and some giant signings today this week. This is going to be a fully loaded show tonight. Get your hands on it. Everybody get excited as we start off with the signings of this week. The Indians signed Ryan Hannigan to a minor league contract. He spent the majority of last season in the Colorado Rockies organization. The St. Louis Cardinals agreed to terms with Bud Norris. He certainly could be a valuable late innings reliever for the Cardinals. We don't know yet if it's a minor league or a major league contract, but he did kind of fizzled off after a strong start with the LA Angels last year. Finished with a 4.21 ERA, and his velocity went really downhill after the All-Star break as his K9 rate was 9.5 and his walks per 9 innings was 4.6. So it all really went downhill. And he'll probably maybe he'll be a middle innings reliever. I don't think he will be anywhere near a set up man role for the Cardinals this year. I think he's in a good organization now in St. Louis, so we'll see. I wish him a lot of luck there. The Washington Nationals acquire utility man Matt Reynolds from the division rival New York Mets. I know he's accomplished little in the MLB. He has to probably has to beat out Wilmer Defoe for one of the last reserve infielder spots to make the opening man. But he still has options, or he could try to sneak him through waivers if he's just flat out stinks during spring training in the Nationals organization. And former Aces contractor sues agency Levin sues Biogenesis. But we shall see what happens with that. Padres place pitcher Jose Torres on the restricted list. And it looks like this is in regards to a domestic dispute in December in which he pointed a gun at the woman he lives with. And he's recently been charged with assault with a deadly weapon, criminal damage, and intimidation. So, with placing Torres on paid leave to start the spring training season, so this is probably a very smart move by the Padres to have him placed on paid leave and use that 40-man roster spot for somebody else at this point. Orioles avoid arbitration with Kevin Gausman and will earn $5.6 million this next season. Rangers signed Trevor Plouffe to a minor league contract and will compete probably for a bench job with the Texas Rangers this next year. Last year, he split time with the Rays and the A's. and he could be likely be a bench role if Plouffe makes the roster. Twins signed Chris Heisey to a minor league contract with an invite to MLB spring training. Rays outright Michael Johnson. He cleared waivers and will be sent to AAA Durham once next season starts, as he has cleared waivers. And Johnson slashed 224 last year in the Atlanta Braves organization. And a hello to Von Hook out there. The Toronto Blue Jays signed Craig Breslow to a minor league contract. And we'll see if he can crack the 25-man opening day 25-man roster or not. Cardinals designate Rowan Wick for assignment as part of the Bud Norris signing. And Wick was added in the 40-man roster in advance of the Rule 5 draft in the 2016 season. And he spent most of last year in AA and AAA. And probably will go back to AAA or AA. And the Braves signed Chris Stewart to a one-year contract. It is a non-guaranteed MLB contract, but he will be competing with Tyler Flowers and Kurt Suzuki to be in the squad this year. But we shall see if Stewart can crack the 25-man roster, but he fell out of favor last year in Pittsburgh, and now we'll try an opportunity in Atlanta next year. The double secret free agent camp of the free agents have begun. There are about 110 free agents, about 40 MLB free agents in camp right now, who are going to probably showcase their stuff and hopefully get signed by an MLB team. But they could, of course, call it the Scott Boras is an idiot for asking the high prices he is for his players camp, too. As most of the free agents are, for the most part, Scott Boras clients. Boras clients. Avisail Garcia wins arbitration against the White Sox. He will earn about $6.7 million this season in the White Sox organization. And the White Sox sign Hector Santiago to a minor league deal and would earn $2 million in the majors, and also lands the White Sox another bounce back arm at this point. Padres signed catcher AJ Ellis to a minor league contract worth $1.25 million and is returning to the NL West after a subpar campaign last year with the Miami Marlins and hit 210 last season in the squat and will likely be the backup for Austin Hedges and will compete with Rocky Gale, Rafael Lopez, and Luis Torrens. And this could be a good way to get some inside info on the LA Dodgers for the Padres. And the Phillies signed Drew Hutchinson to a minor league contract as he'll look to possibly be part of the Phillies bullpen situation with the young rotation in Philadelphia this year. And he was traded to Pittsburgh in 2016 as part of the Liriano salary dump. And he never received any opportunities despite putting good numbers in AAA. But he will probably be, it'll be hard for him to probably make the rotation in Philadelphia. But I think he could probably maybe be a swing man out of the bullpen next year for the Phillies, should he opt to maybe pitch out of the bullpen in AAA this year if he does not make the 25-man roster. And Seattle Mariners are going to be without Ryan Healy for 4 to 6 weeks after hand surgery. And it's also a first early part of the year, so that's not going to be a big deal for the Mariners as of right now. The Cincinnati Reds signed Cliff Pennington to a $1.5 million minor league contract. He spent the last 2 seasons of the Angels where he hit .232 the past 2 seasons. But he is a good defender and probably a stopgap option for the rebuilding Cincinnati Reds. And they avoid agreement with Jeff Manship due to Manship failing a physical. Jake Odorizzi wins his arbitration hearing before he gets traded. We'll get to that in a little bit later. And Blue Jays win their arbitration hearing with Marcus Stroman and will receive 6.5 million instead of 6.9 million. It could be trade bait depending on where the Blue Jays are towards the middle of the year. Colin McHugh wins his arbitration hearing, but he could be on the trading block or could be in the Astros bullpen, as I don't see McHugh start being a starter next year with the crowded rotation in Houston. Twins win arbitration against Kyle Gibson and he will earn $4.2 million this year. Trevor Bauer wins arbitration against the Indians and will now receive $6.5 million. Brewers signed Nick Franklin to a minor league contract with an invite to the MLB. And the Blue Jays upgrade their rotation by adding a fifth man with a good rotation now. They got Jaime Garcia to a $10 million contract, $8 million in guaranteed and $2 million buyout. But now the Blue Jays have completed their rotation with Marcus Stroman, Aaron Sanchez, Marco Estrada, and J.A. Happ. I can see Garcia being slotted as a 3 or 4 man in the Blue Jays rotation. And Garcia hasn't been great, but he hasn't been bad either. He's kind of been average. But if Garcia can stay healthy, he certainly could give He certainly could give the Blue Jays a solid rotation. And another pitcher getting signed. The Baltimore Orioles finally sign a starting pitcher with Andrew Kashner. It is a 2-year, $16 million contract and will receive consecutive salaries of 5 and 8 million, and the remaining 3 millions are deferred to 2020. And Kashner could end up being the two guy behind Dylan Bundy on an Orioles team that is in desperate need of starting pitching, and they definitely need to go after more starting pitching besides the three starters they have. But I certainly think this could. Kashner did pretty well last year in Texas, and hopefully he can do well in hitter-friendly Camden Yards next year. And the Milwaukee Brewers sign another starter, Wade Miley, and this will be a $2.5 million to a minor league contract. Wow. And he could earn up to as much as 5.7 million if he makes 29 starts. But this is another buy low candidate, and I certainly think Miley could be definitely a low risk, high reward for the Brewers, but they certainly still need to look at bringing in a high end pitcher still. Last year, his ERA was not all that wonderful, 5.48 ERA. And also, he has had control issues this last year. But also, I don't know if his stuff will translate well at Miller Park, so we'll see what happens with that. I just don't see it working out for Wade Miley over there in Milwaukee this year. The Chicago Cubs signs Wayne Shea Simmons to a split major league contract. He's been placed on the 40-man roster, and to create a roster spot, they moved Drew Smiley to the 60-day disabled list. And the Marlins win their arbitration over Dan Straley and will earn 3.375 million this year. And the Royals win their arbitration hearing over Brandon Maurer and will earn 2.95 million. Texas Rangers sign Edison Volquez to a 2-year minor league contract. And Volquez went through Tommy John surgery late last season and won't pitch this year. But he will look to aim for a return in 2019. We'll aim for to look for a return in 2019. After he recovers from Tommy John. And if he makes the roster, he'll make 4.5 in incentives. But for the most part, Miami's on the hook for the 13 million after releasing him last season. And I hope Volquez can get back on track next year. I just had too many injuries last year, so hopefully Edison Volquez can. San Diego Padres claim Rowan Wick off of waivers from the St. Louis Cardinals. But we shall see how he does over there in the Padres organization next year out of the bullpen. And And coming back to St. Louis on a minor league contract is Jason Mott, former closer Jason Mott. He spent time last year with the last few years the Cubs, Rockies, and Braves, and has not been the same pitcher since returning from Tommy John surgery, and will look to mount a comeback with the Cardinals next year. Minnesota's Twins signed Anibal Sanchez to a split MLB contract, but but we'll see if he can make the roster or not. It's only 500,000 guaranteed. But we'll see. I think Sanchez, who's had a dreadful run with the Tigers, I certainly think he could pitch much better at pitcher-friendly Target Field. I think chances are he's going to be part of the bullpen in Minnesota, and I don't expect him to be competing for the starting rotation for the Twins next year. And certainly, he'll probably come if he does make the roster. He will probably be a reliever in Minnesota this year. And Miami-Dade County is to sue Jeffrey Loria and the Marlins over the municipality's right to share profits that were wrapped at last fall in the sale. And of course, Miami-Dade County forked over hundreds of millions of dollars to enable construction of the Marlins ballpark, and the city of Miami are entitled from 5% share of a franchise sale. But Loria claims the 1.2 billion did not leave him with any profits as in terms of the contract. We'll see if the Jeters ownership will be involved or not in this lawsuit, given that the liability. We'll see how far the liability goes. It'll be a very interesting discovery process going on with the. And of course, this is a argument against publicly financed ballparks. Arizona Diamondbacks signed Jorge De La Rosa to a minor league contract. De La Rosa did okay as a reliever last year, working a 4.21 ERA, but he did pretty well in tight situations, and he could be that lefty specialist along with Andrew Chafin out of the D-backs bullpen. So I think that will definitely give the D-backs another lefty out of the pen. I am going to be back in a second. And the LA Dodgers re signed Chase Utley to a 2-year, $2 million contract. And this comes as a surprise depending on how due to how old Chase Utley is and will definitely be coming off the bench again next year. Indians signed Rajai Davis to a minor league contract with a non-roster invite. And Davis was with the Indians back in the World Series championship run 2 years ago. Then he batted 235 last season, but he certainly can still steal a base if the opportunity is needed. So certainly that gives the Indians a speed option in the outfield. Phillies signed Fernando Abad to a $2.5 million salary. And that definitely helps the Phillies bullpen a bit. And the Rangers will not sign Sang Juan O after failing a physical and could likely be in limbo this season due to a failed physical. So it's going to get interesting to see what happens with O if he can pass a physical first before getting signed somewhere. Rays acquire C.J. Cron and surprisingly designate Corey Dickerson for assignment as the corresponding move. And Cron was definitely expandable after the signings of Shohei Ohtani and Zach Cozart. Especially now with Luis Valbuena probably going to be rotating between first and third this year. But he's probably less than an ideal platoon partner for Brad Miller or Lucas Duda at this point. So we'll see what happens with that. But I expect Dickerson to get claimed pretty quickly off of waivers. And the following then today's trade, the Twins upgrade the rotation by trading for Jake Odorizzi, and in return, Jermaine Palacios is going back to the Rays. And also, Michael Pineda was placed on the 60-day disabled list to make room for Jake Odorizzi. But he's definitely a starter that could fill the void of Irvin Santana for the time being, who will miss some time due to a finger surgery, and this is certainly the upgrade in the rotation the Twins needed. You're going to have Odorizzi, Barrios on top of the rotation with Alberto Mejia and Kyle Gibson, with Phil Hughes, Tyler Duffy, and Anibal Sanchez competing for the fifth spot in the rotation in spring training. And another big signing today, the Padres sign Eric Hosmer to a 8-year, $144 million contract. And this happens to be the largest contract in San Diego Padres franchise history. But now with Hosmer at first this next year, you're likely going to see Will Myers move to the outfield, and that batting order just got a lot better. Now the heart of your order is likely going to be Hosmer, Myers, and Headley. And of course, you got a lot of these youngsters too. So I don't think the Padres are done. They might go out and sign some pitching now. But this was a big signing by the Padres, and now the Friars could that definitely gives the Friars that much needed pop in the batting order this year. Former Giant Eduardo Nunez was re-signed by the Red Sox this year and will earn $4 million this year and $4 million next year. And his options worth. And Nunez will certainly be in the utility role next year for the Red Sox. The New York Mets signed Jason Vargas to a. I don't know the extent of the contract, but Jason Vargas is signed by the Mets, and that certainly gives some insurance to a very banged up starting rotation next year in New York. So you're going to have Thor, Matt Harvey, Steven Matz, Zach Wheeler, Seth Lugo, Jacob DeGrom. So you're definitely going to have some flexibility in the Mets rotation next year. And I don't think the Mets are going to be as bad as they were if the pitching can stay healthy next year in New York. And the White Sox outright Dylan Covey to AAA Charlotte. Covey was not wonderful last year with a 7.71 ERA. Angels signed Chris Carter to a minor league contract. It could be a replacement for CJ Cron. But Carter didn't catch on with Oakland last season and now will try to reinvent himself in the Angels organization. Angels also signed Chris Young to a 1 year contract. 1 year major league contract. And he'll definitely be a utility guy for the Angels next year. And he was definitely a good bench option for the Yankees and Red Sox and hope to bring that to the Angels next year. Or this season, excuse me. And now on to Giants signings for this week. The Giants signed Tony Watson to a 3 year, $7 million contract. And that certainly puts a good lefty addition to the bullpen, especially with Will Smith not likely to be back in time for the opening day. So that yeah, definitely more Giant signings. And Tony Watson's addition to the bullpen could make Josh Osich or Stephen Okert expendable from the 40-man roster. And I would be leaning towards Osich maybe being waived after spring training. Osich has had enough opportunities the last couple years out of the Giants bullpen, and he has gotten worse and worse and worse. And it totally would not be a total surprise if we see Josh Osich waived after spring training. Just Osich has been too hittable last year, and Okert has shown some signs of life. He's had good stretches. It's just finding the consistency for Okert next year, and that gives Okert another year in AAA and has more option and still has another year of options, whereas Osich is getting very close to running out of options. And then you've got DJ Snelton. And I think Snelton, if he does well in spring training, he's certainly going to leapfrog both Osich and Okert. And then you got Derek Holland. And Holland will likely be another lefty coming out of the bullpen. So you could see three lefties out of the Giants bullpen next year, counting Holland, and Holland could certainly fill that Giants role of a swingman next year. So having more lefty options is going to make things much better for the Giants bullpen options and make life easier for Bruce Bochy. And the other change that's coming up is you're going to see, looks like Brian Sabian's going to be taking a more hands-on role this year on the day-to-day operations, which definitely does not bode well for Bobby Evans. Bobby Evans is certainly going to be on the hot seat this year, along with Bruce Bochy. And this could also be a sign that if things do not turn around this year, and the Giants are not competing for a playoff spot this year, you could see Bobby Evans being fired along with the Giants parting ways with Bruce Bochy. And we could be heading towards a house cleaning in San Francisco. That is a certainty. That could be a certainty this year, depending on how things go with the front office, as the Giants don't want to rebuild at this point. And this is not, and it would be sad to see Bochy leave like this if that were to happen. But now the pressure's on Bobby Evans to get it done. Now with Brian Sabian taking more of an active role, that it just does not bode well. But we shall see what happens if the Giants stumble out of the gate here. And let's see. It's time for buyers or sellers. Are the Sharks buyers or sellers at the trade deadline? For the San Jose Sharks, I certainly think they're going to be sellers. Not big time sellers, but I certainly think they need to try to get some sort of a return back for Aaron Dell, who's going to be a pending UFA. And then maybe start listening to offers for Joe Pavelski, as I don't think Pavelski is going to be back in with the Sharks after his contract's up, as I think next year is going to be his last year, and it's certainly going to be time for, it's almost going to be Logan Couture's time to become the new captain of the Sharks. And the youth movement, as Doug Wilson's looking to add more speed to the roster next year. And the youth movement has really started to step up for the Sharks. So I certainly think Joe Thornton's number. I certainly think Joe Thornton's days could be numbered along with Joe Pavelski. And another guy who could be traded if they really want to start focusing more on the farm and getting back some draft picks could be Brendan Dillon. I certainly think Brendan Dillon has some trade value. And you might have Julius Bergman getting pretty close to cracking the roster. Rudolph Balcer is definitely on the offensive side. I think he's a year away. Maybe Noah Road could crack the roster next year. But I certainly think the Sharks are going to be more focused on the youth movement. So I certainly think they're going to be more in a position to sell than to buy. And I'm glad to see Doug Wilson maybe starting to rely more on the youth movement and trying to get younger and faster. And maybe hopefully, if they do trade Aaron Dell somewhere and get a return for him, that maybe Troy Grosnick could get an opportunity to be a backup goaltender for the rest of the season. And they're just playing with house money. They've overachieved this year. And if they can survive this stretch with the Central, this is certainly a good young team. And I for a while I had Peter DeBoer dead man walking in San Jose. Not anymore. I actually think Peter DeBoer actually deserves to get his. I think the Sharks. I think he deserves to have his option picked up by the Sharks next year. They've definitely overachieved, and the youngsters have really started to respond, and the future's really starting to look bright for the San Jose Sharks at this point. Now on to the NL East, the AL East preview. I am going to start from who's going to finish fifth place to first place. And this kind of changed a little bit today based on some of the signings and trades. I certainly think the team that's going to finish dead last this year in the AL East, this was a toss up, but after what happened today, I think the Rays are going to finish in the cellar as they look to rebuild. And now that the rotation looks really weak with Odorizzi traded, and I think at some time this season you're going to see Alex Cobb get not Alex, you're going to see Chris Archer get traded out of Tampa Bay later this year for a king's ransom. But I think by the trade deadline, Chris Archer is going to be gone out of Tampa Bay as they complete the rebuild. But certainly you're going to see a very young team in Tampa Bay. Hopefully we can make an official announcement on a new ballpark in Tampa later this year. But I certainly think it's going to be another year of being in dead last for the Rays. Fourth place, I will have to say, is going to be the Baltimore Orioles. The pitching just got slightly better today with the addition of Andrew Kashner. But other than that, it's a mediocre starting rotation. And they're facing a lot more questions and answers with Manny Machado's contract being up after this year. And I think if Baltimore is where I think they're going to be, floundering near the cellar, I certainly think Manny Machado is certainly going to be a player that could be moved at the trade deadline, as maybe the Orioles could be going into rebuild at this point. And then can Gaussman be trusted? Gaussman's been inconsistent. Dylan Bundy has definitely been the ace. And then you certainly have some bullpen pieces that could definitely be traded towards the deadline. You could have maybe even a J.J. Hardy moved. You could have Zach Britton. I certainly could bring Baltimore back a handsome return. I'm trying to think of that other bullpen guy that was closing last year for the Orioles. Aaron O'Day, that's another guy that could bring back something for the Orioles. And Brad Brock, I certainly think Brad Brock's another guy that could be a late innings reliever for another team if Baltimore starts to be in fourth place. But yeah, and then also probably be, I think you're going to see Buck Showalter and the Orioles part ways after the season, along with Dan Duquette. I certainly think Peter Angelos is probably going to be cleaning it up, cleaning house after this year in Baltimore, and there's just too, a lot more questions and answers for the Orioles this year. Third place would My third place choice for this year has to be the Toronto Blue Jays. The rotation looks pretty good. I think now the Blue Jays, with the upgrade of the starting pitching, with Jaime being your five, I certainly think Jaime Garcia being your five, that definitely gives more options to the Blue Jays bullpen. But it's going to come down to the injuries and the bats. Can the bats be better this year for Toronto? But I don't know. Maybe they can compete for a wild card. I'm not sure. But I certainly think they're going to be. I'm leaning towards them being maybe close to 500 this season in Toronto. And definitely John Gibbons is going to be on the hot seat this year for the Blue Jays. But if things start going south for the Blue Jays, I certainly think Josh Donaldson could be traded somewhere. You could see them start listening to offers from Marcus Stroman, and Toronto could head for a rebuild situation. But I think they're in third place in a very competitive AL East. That's where I have the Blue Jays as of right now. Second place, the Boston Red Sox. I certainly think they've got the pitching to be a wild card team this year. Problem is, they still lack the hitting, and they still have the Mexican standoff going on with JD Martinez. And at some point, one side has to blink, as they definitely need that power bat to get the Red Sox to maybe win a playoff series or not. But I certainly think the Red Sox are a playoff team this year. They're going to probably, I think they'll be the number one wild card this year. But they're my number two team in the AL East this year will be the Boston Red Sox. And the number one team who will win the AL East this year, the New York Yankees. The Bronx Bombers are back this year. They definitely have the batting now with Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge. They are going to hit some bombs this year. And Gary Sanchez, that's another power hitter. More bombs from him. But that batting order is going to be lethal in New York this year. And you're going to see plenty of bombs in the Bronx this year. And they don't have a bad starting rotation either. You got Luis Severino, who's pretty good, Sonny Gray, CC Sabathia, and then you got a young Jordan Montgomery. If he can get it together, could be good. And then I think there's one other youngster that's pretty good out of the Yankees rotation. But I certainly think, and then you got a pretty good bullpen from the Yankees too. Certainly have your flamethrower in Aroldis Chapman, who, as long as Chapman's good. Oh, and then of course you got Jacoby Ellsbury. That's the big question mark for the Yankees this year is going to be Greg Bird if he can stay healthy. Yeah, I bet A's fans do miss Sonny Gray, but I think you're going to see Sonny Gray win a ring. Could win a ring this year with the New York Yankees. Oh yeah, then you got Masahiro Tanaka. That's definitely another guy. So you do have a three-headed monster in that Yankee starting rotation. And we'll see if Jordan Montgomery can get it together this year. But I certainly see the New York Yankees going up against the Houston Astros in the ALCS this year. And this will be a team to watch out for. So we'll see how many home runs Stanton and Judge will put up this year. It's going to be a great contest. And then Gary Sanchez, I certainly think he's going to hit a lot of bombs for the Yankees this year. So this lineup's definitely deadly, and I think the Yankees will win the AL East. Next week we will be talking about the AL Central. Can the Indians go for three in a row? We will find out as for next week's show who will win the as I preview the AL Central. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. So, peace, love, and soul. Good night, everybody.